Well, for anyone who hasn't joined us yet, I do want to introduce myself to start. My name is Samantha, and I am our team leader for the 2021 CSULB Bateman campaign team. We've been working on a month-long campaign to spread awareness and to promote civility in public discourse. After the last several years, I think it's a topic we all care about, have been impacted by, have some story or feeling. So we think it's really important. And these roundtables are some of my favorite parts of our campaign, to hear different perspectives from different people about different aspects of civility. So we are really excited to tonight talk about corporate responsibility and what we as professionals or future professionals, entrepreneurs, community leaders, what we need to consider when it comes to not only creating a culture of civility in the workplace, maybe with our employees or with our clients, but also how are we when we're forward-facing and dealing with consumers and the general public, especially with social unrest and different things like that come. How do we deal with that, and how do we do that civilly? Easier said than done a lot of the time, I think. So I would love to hand it over to our roundtable guests today, so you can introduce yourselves a little bit. I'll just go in order of how I see you guys on the screen, so feel free to introduce yourself. I have Aaron here. We'll have you start.
Great. Well, again, thank you for having me. My name is Aaron Elimelech. I'm the marketing manager for ASI Communications on campus. I've been working with ASI for about 18 years now. Graduated in 2001, so I'm an alum from the campus as well, and very involved when I was a student there as well. And of course, it's just an honor to be here today.
Thank you. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
I will sneak over to Zach here. Zachary, sorry, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, Zach, please, unless you're my aunt, who continues to insist on calling me Zachary. I do answer primarily to Zach. So at any rate, thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. And I also want to thank you for doing what you're doing here and all, making yourselves vulnerable and continuing fearlessly with this deeply important conversation. I'm Zach Benjamin. I'm the CEO of an organization called Jewish Long Beach, which was formerly the Jewish Federation and Jewish Community Foundation of Long Beach and West Orange County. And primarily, we seek to preserve and advance an environment in Long Beach, West Orange County, and worldwide that in which Jewish life can thrive and advance from generation to generation, but also in which the Jewish community can serve the broader community in a variety of ways from a place of Jewish values. And we do that through grant making, through development of emerging leaders, through stewardship of community resources. We have a foundation with about $30 million in assets under management. So quite a multifaceted organization, and everything we do and the fact that we rely on a deeply ideologically diverse base of donors and stakeholders really makes this topic eminently relevant to us every day. And it has to be top of mind every day in everything we do. So thank you again.
No, of course. Thank you so much for joining us. And then Natasha, I'll have you take it away.
Hi. Hi, I'm Natasha Dressler. I am the founder of Natasha Dressler PR. I have my own solo PR practice out here in Orange County, California. I am a huge advocate for the BIPOC and LGBT plus community, with a lot of clients who fall under that umbrella. As a person of color myself, it is just very important to me to amplify not only my voice, my clients' voices, but those around me who maybe feel like their voices aren't, as amplified. I'm big on inclusion and diversity. So being a part of this panel meant a lot to me. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Of course, we're happy to have you. Yeah. So for our audience, I have a few questions and topics that I'd like to discuss with you. And then of course, we'll open up to a Q&A for anyone who has questions. Feel free to put those in the chat or, whatever you'd like. Okay, audience, but we'll start first. And I think, this is part of what we have in our communication toolbox, where we as CivilityLB try to teach better communication habits and things like that. And one thing we always say is, you know, defining your terms in a conversation. So I would love to start with just, how do you define corporate civility, or, you know, civility in the workplace and things like that to you? Because I think it means something different to everyone. I would love to hear what that means to you. And whoever wants to start, it's an open conversation. Feel free to talk with each other and things like that. But that's the question I'd want to start with. Just, what does it mean? What are we here for? I know it's a tough one that takes a minute to form, and I think you might have answered it somewhat in some of your introductions as well.
Well, I guess please. No, please, go ahead, Natasha.
I'm like, and I can call you guys out too.
I mean, it's definitely your behavior. That's, you know, to start, let's just kick it off there. It's your behaviors, your language, and even things you don't say. So I think that, you know, it's a corporate responsibility. It's a self-responsibility to be the best person you can be out there in the world right now, because there is a lot of civil unrest and there is a lot of things going on, and it's our duty to make sure that not only are we doing our job to be a part of the good, but stop the negative when we hear it as well.
Yeah, we talk a lot about being a big tent, and that in this environment is difficult because it does mean that there are people under our tent, so to speak, who might consider each other's views abhorrent or their perspectives abhorrent. You know, now all of this is somewhat, I think, what would be within the reason of hopefully everybody in this room. We're not bringing what we would consider to be destructive viewpoints or dangerous or, you know, viewpoints that are outside of a basic value system. But we're finding even within what one would call the mainstream spectrum of values, you know, there are those who find themselves both on that spectrum and yet in deep disagreement with each other to a point where it's not to be reconciled. The other thing is, so that's challenging, but we're committed to it, and we're committed to modeling a tone and tenor of discourse, whether that's in our community newspaper, or whether it's internally among our staff, whether it's in our social media activities or our calls to action, that we would hope others would emulate. And then, you know, when you talk about corporate civility, there's the front stage community facing, and then there's of course the internal intra-staff as well. And in both cases, it's imperative but also challenging that we try and at least place ourselves in the shoes and in the behind the eyes of the those that we're dealing with, who may have a different perspective. And we dealt with this. I dealt with this yesterday. A member of my team who was, you know, commenting on what another member of the team might make, and they, you know, should be doing more. And I challenged that person to perhaps think about what they might know of her of their day-to-day, what the other person might know of their day-to-day, and all that each does that the other's not even aware of, and to think a little more abstractly before perhaps going there. But it's not easy, and there is no panacea for all this.
Definitely agree. And for us, you know, associated students represent so many different students and so many different populations on campus. So we have to be very mindful of any messaging and things that we put out there, because you could potentially offend someone. You do run into really sticky turf. I'll be honest with you, these past 4 years, you ran into some sticky turf with a lot of different populations. And how do you not offend someone with certain things? But I think it's really just paying attention to our practices. the messaging that we're putting out there, the contracts that we sign, the agreements, the businesses we're involved with, and really looking at that. And I know that kind of gets into your other questions, but really just looking at those practices and making sure that we're thinking a couple steps ahead so that we don't offend any students down the line. Or honestly, there's so many other communities, donors, alum, other populations that you really don't want to upset. So we really have to think about all those groups before we make certain decisions.
And that's a really great point of all of your different audiences and the people that you have to satisfy and the messaging that comes from you as an organization or a professional or a person. And I would actually love to dig into what you do a little bit, you know, because I have a question kind of how do you address incivility, or how do you address these tough topics, you know, when you're facing these different audiences? What are some tactics that you use? I mean, we have a lot of professionals, you know, communications professionals in here that I think would like to hear some of those things of like, how do you deal with that, especially when maybe a message that you need to send to one audience conflicts with maybe your stakeholders or something like that. I'd be curious to hear a little more about that, and maybe even an instance that you could think of in recent times that maybe there was some kind of conflict there and how you dealt with it.
Yeah, so being in PR, this is something that's always running through my mind, and it's something, you know, I have to talk to my clients about constantly. I had a potential new client last year tell a colleague of mine that they didn't want to work with me because I was too political. And I was taken aback by that. And because one of my core values is if something is unethical, I'm going to speak out. I'm going to speak out about it and against it. And, you know, I actually wasn't offended by that. I took it as, you know what, we just wouldn't be the right fit. I cannot work for someone that doesn't align with my core values and what I believe in. And if that's going to be a deal breaker about what I believe in and how I speak out about it, then unfortunately, then it doesn't work out for me, and it is not going to work out for them at all. For me, it's using my platform and using my, you know, my social media right now. Also, it's doing media training with my clients, pressing them that they're going to get hard questions sometimes. Right now, I represent a large Latinx podcast, and they're very opinionated on the political spectrum. And we've had to have those conversations like, look, you're going to get backlash if you say certain things. Are you ready for that? And how are we going to address it if it happens? So it's just being prepared and being ready for it. But something I can offer for all of you is make sure if you're going to repost something, you're going to take a stance on something, that you've done your research. You as college students, we've all known how to do research, and you know that's something we all thrive in. So making sure that we research and educate ourselves before we jump the gun and make these posts or make statements, because there are times that it's going to come back to you, and we don't want to sound tone deaf, especially as communications professionals, because we're the ones leading the charge on that.
I'd say for us, so it's twofold. So you have like most of my answers, right? You have our internal practices and things that we do internally with our employees. And I think we do want to make sure, so for us, it's always this interesting mixing ground because you have so many different cultures and groups that come together. So you see things happening and some issues turn up and things come up that are really controversial. So I think for us, it's making sure we're very transparent, with our practices and our policies as an organization, and making sure that people understand, there's a lot of different groups here, and I think you need to be aware of that. You need to be aware of how you're coming off to various populations. We do have training, big corporate-wide training events, and those are opportunities where we can clarify some of these values and goals, and and just share that with students to make sure that they understand the environment that they're in before they step into it. And then I think now you get into the public realm, and I know for us, a lot of times, of course, we're very careful with messaging. And we know how quickly things could spread on social media with one comment. So I think we're very careful about answering things, making sure, again, that we check things. I know that's a great point that you made, just taking that extra step just to check that fact. Because there is a lot of misinformation out there. And, for us, one comment can start a whole chain of things. So we want to make sure that we do have an opportunity to DM that person, that student, talk to them, clarify the message, you know, and answer them and address those things. You know, sometimes you might need to do that personally and more privately, and then sometimes you may need to do it more publicly if you feel like you might have bigger questions or more questions in that matter. So I think definitely treating that and not ignoring it. That's one big thing. You know, you can't say, oh, it'll go away. I think you do have to address it, and you have to make sure. Otherwise, other people are probably thinking it, and it's a good stance for you to get ahead of this if you can.
Yeah, you've both made the point that if you're going to enter the conversation and you're going to contribute something concrete, data, you'd better know what you're talking about, right? And I think that's hugely important. And being educated before you hold yourself up as an authority, or you offer an authoritative statement, because that's one of the major, I think, issues contributing to the degradation of civility and discourse is we could veer off in the direction of the impact of social media on discourse, and you get me going on this, and it's something I feel strongly about. It's not been positive, but we have access to such a variety of individuals' perspectives, and they can readily, in turn, amplify their own voices, and sometimes they're not the most educated on the topics that they may genuinely believe that they're educated on. So for us, more often than not, it's about providing a forum for and a venue for education rather than for pontification. So I'll give you an example, actually, from the community that I was in prior to coming to Long Beach about a year and a half ago. I was executive director of the Jewish Federation of New Mexico. And shortly after the 2016 elections, there was a lot of concern around immigration, refugee resettlement, immigrants' rights. And our organization that is not an issue that we're equipped to provide expertise on, or to make definitive take definitive positions on, and we were being asked to, so we pivoted a little bit. We had to have our finger on the pulse of consensus and of what the community's concerns were, our constituency's concerns were. So rather than make a statement, we chose instead to create a forum where we actually invited the community into our facility, into our space. We invited a panel of a refugee resettlement expert, an immigration attorney, the Anti-Defamation League, and a rabbi. So we were looking at this from the kind of civil liberties perspective, from the immigrants' rights perspective, the refugees' perspective, and the Jewish perspective, because that's the core of our mission. And the panelists had a conversation, and they had a conversation with the audience, and eyeballing the audience, I knew that there were a variety of political perspectives represented, and I can say with confidence that every single one walked away feeling it was time well spent, walked away feeling better educated on the issues, and that that their concerns had been heard as a community. So sometimes it's about educating rather than pontificating.
That's definitely true. And when people are allowed to have those conversations and come together, we found that there are usually points of agreement, or you can, like you said, educate yourself on a topic maybe you didn't know about, and it helps kind of further the mission or whatever your conversation is along. But that kind of brings another perspective too of, that also can lead to having bad conversations, debates, arguments. It could definitely turn a different way. I know, Natasha, for you, you run your own firm, so you have the ability to choose kind of who you think will work best with you. But for maybe someone like Aaron, you work for the university, I would love to kind of hear your different perspectives of like when those things happen, when you have that pushback, you know, and you see there's students that are pushing back from a statement that's made, or there's people who feel like they're not being heard, and on the sides that you agree with or don't agree with, you know, how do you really deal with that? Or when you're in your podcast and you say you're going to get pushback from this, how do you deal with that kind of uncivil behaviors when it comes to your clients or your corporations? And, you know, what is your responsibility to that beyond just ignoring them? Or is there one?
You know, I think it's, again, it's looking at the teachable moment. You know, if you are able to pull something out of it and try to educate both sides best you can, it really does get tough. I know that we're in the middle of some things sometimes online that, you know, it's hard to answer because you know that there's both sides are going to really take this thing personally. But I do think really trying to really look at the issue from all angles, you know, and for us remain as, you know, neutral as possible, but still, I mean, you can't, it's hard to have really a stance sometimes. So I think it's really good to just be very as neutral as possible to make sure you're not offending any population, and that you're really answering with as much information as possible. Otherwise, you could really start something. So I know for us, that's one practice we do all the time before we do anything. If it's an article that we're putting out, if it's a news, you know, if we're doing a social media post, or putting out a video. I mean, we really want to make sure that our messaging is consistent, you know, and that it's thought out. That's really what our goals. I don't know if I answered your question totally or not. Mm-hmm. Feel free.
I was like, I probably muted myself. I'm having like really bad allergies today. So it's interesting you bring that up for both of us, because yesterday I was copy editing an article that was getting ready to go to an editor for that client, and the interview answers, some of them were very harsh about the last administration. And, you know, as much as I agree on a lot of the feedback, it comes off as unprofessional, and it comes off as catty when you're giving a professional interview that's going to be published. So as I was copy editing it and, you know, changing the verbiage around so it flew a little bit better, and, you know, I had the conversation of like, look, let's not keep beating the dead horse. We've moved forward. We're progressing. The language that we've chosen is going to flow better, and it's going to be easier to digest, because if someone doesn't agree with your political stance, it's still going to be more digestible looking versus it looking just angry. And it's a hard conversation to have, but you have to remember that, you know, you have to just, we're all trying to come together and unify right now. It's been a really rough last 4 years for a lot of us, and we're coming out of that. And I think it's like, if we're going to come out of that and be bigger and better, let's just keep continuing on, and like, let's speak out against things that are happening right now, and let's, you know, keep going, and things that still need to be amplified. But some of the petty things, let's leave those behind, and let's just, you know, rework that and go. That literally happened yesterday. But, you know, other than that, I mean, it's just being cognizant of the times and what's going on, and, you know, really just making sure you're leading by example. And I think that's just the best any of us can do right now.
Natasha, I think you made a great point about sometimes declining to speak out, even when asked, even when you're being asked to make a statement or take a position that you believe in or even deeply believe in. You know, I think we all have, to some extent, are serving as examples to our various audiences and constituencies, and there's a time to be more aggressive, and there's a time to pull back, and and perhaps say or engage less. And it's hard because it may be antithetical to every fiber of your moral fabric, but nonetheless, it pays dividends. It's an investment in your relationships and in your mission, ultimately.
Those are very interesting perspectives. We do talk a lot about what civility is, but we don't always talk about what it isn't, right? Because I think a lot of groups or people can often think that civility is a way to control social messages, or, you know, the advancing of, you know, certain, what's the word that I'm looking for, but, you know, movements, right? That word is used to kind of stranglehold movements that are really important in our communities. So, and I love the PR answers that we're getting, right? Well, we don't say this, it's all on brand and we're neutral, but when you can't be neutral, you know, how do you deal with that? And maybe this is more of a personal question too, like you as a professional, how do you deal with that when it is something that you don't want to be silent on, but maybe you have to? Or how do you approach those conversations with your organizations of, this is important and maybe we need to take a stance on something like that? Like, how do you approach those types of situations? So I think that's probably more relevant now than ever, at least for our students and, you know, our generation.
People value being consulted on issues that are important to them, that they feel they have expertise in. So when it's not appropriate to take a public stand, or maybe even when you're taking a public stand, maybe it doesn't go far enough for some, or I'd say never underestimate the value of your relationships with individuals and also smaller sub-constituencies. So what you can't say or do, perhaps when you're messaging for a big tent, you can accomplish by engaging in a more interpersonal way with those who are most concerned with the issue at hand. And you can maybe even move the bar in ways that are far more effective when you're working behind the scenes. And again, as individuals, or in smaller, quieter settings than you can when you're taking advantage of your bully pulpit. So I think the work that gets done between human beings can be far more effective than what's said broadly to message to a broad audience.
I think taking advantage of your network too. You know, I know for us, we're part of different communicators groups on campus. We're connected with the campus, PR staff. So I think sometimes even going to them, and really before we answer something, let's find out the university stance, and sometimes allowing the university to speak first on an issue. I know a lot of times we just wanted to see what, just to consult with them, and find out best practices. Has anyone gone through this kind of stuff before? Maybe even finding out, a better solution collectively, or just also putting in, like you said, it's on their radar. A lot of times folks aren't, I know for us, ASI tends to learn about things a lot sooner. So we tend to let our campus administrators know about these issues and that they're coming their way. Hey, just want to give you a heads up. This might be coming your way. You might want to get ready for this. So I know we tend to be an antenna for a lot of those things. But again, I know for us, we tend to consult different groups. We find out, hey, what's going on? How you guys doing? What are your thoughts on this matter? Which, just to get a general pulse for the campus. I know that helps us a lot of times. I will say it's a good thing that I don't have my finger on the social media button, because I know I'm very quick to state a different opinion. So I'm happy that I have talented folks that are at the helm. One of them is in our audience now, but just different students that represent and help us make sure that we are our best public persona. But I have the quick trigger finger if I hear somebody say something, or if I see a troll in a thread, I will I want to say something, but I have to say, oh, let me step back, teachable moment for myself. Let me be civil and let me step back and be the bigger person. Hear where the student's at, or hear where this person's at, and not kind of jump to that level, but let me just hear this out real quick before I kind of knee-jerk say something wrong. Let me step back, take a breath, and say the right thing, and just make sure that it's an educated response. So good thing that I'm not at the helm, but again, for us, again, good thing we have a great community of people that can help us out.
So I'm like Aaron. I will pop off in a minute. I'm like, no. So another example. So because I am my brand, I used to have my personal Instagram mixed with my, clients, public facing, whatever. And I was like, I'm unapologetic. I am who I am. Like I said, if you don't want to work with me or we don't fit, we don't fit. So being that I'm a big fan of politics, and I'm a researcher, and I am a communications professional. There was a day, and I used to be a journalist. So there was a day that somebody was on the news spouting some stuff out right after the election was called and won. And I just couldn't take it anymore. And so I did this like calm fact-checked video on my story, and the trolls that came out for me and how many times I got reported, my Instagram got actually taken down for 4 weeks. And I have a friend who works at Facebook. I used to work in tech, and he let me know, like, hey, I'll get it taken care of. I can appeal it. And I was like, what happened? He's like, you're reported for impersonating someone. I'm like, I've had my Instagram for 10 years. This is so weird. And he's like, it's just a bunch of trolls. And I'm like, so then I was like, okay, you know what? I am who I am, but I'm going to keep my personal one separate. And I went through and did that as soon as it was back. But while I was waiting, I started my own business Instagram, but I did state on there like my 7 core values, like what I believe in. And it's like BIPOC, like lives and voices matter, LGBTQ plus lives and voices matter. All women should have fair and equal pay, blah, 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 blah. There's 7 points, and it's on there. It's on my website. And if people don't agree and don't align, then we don't fit. And I am very choosy on how I engage with people on my my business one, because sometimes you'll get something, but I come from a blended family, and right now, like, what is going on against the Asian American community, just the Asian community in general, is very bothersome. And I have posted some information, some stories, and I've had other publicists come to me and thank me because they can't do that. They're not allowed to do that. So that not only makes me sad, but then tells me we still have a long ways to go as communications professionals, because if we're silencing those who are meant to go out there and communicate what wrong is going on in the world, then we're not doing it right as a corporation. So, that's just, I guess, one real life example. And be careful what you post, because you never know who's watching.
No, so true. But that's a really amazing point. And I would love to expand on that and hear other points of view too, of, for those organizations, like I said, where maybe you can't say something, but what sort of responsibility do we think that organizations and corporations have in addressing things like that are obviously impacting an enormous, portion of our society in different ways, whether that's, the hate crimes that have happened recently to Black Lives Matter and pushback, from certain groups on those types of things. Like, what kind of responsibility do you think that organizations and corporations have to make a statement maybe in that way, or to make a statement against incivility toward people or, their consumers maybe?
Well, I think that when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, everybody jumped and was like, oh my gosh, this is really going on, where there was a good amount of the community that knew what had been going on forever. So we were like, great, this is going to get exposure. This is going to get funding. This is going to help. And you've seen the decline. And that, to me, that's bothersome, because if you're going to talk about it, be about it. So don't sit there and say, hey, we're going to represent this community and do it for the first 3 months and then fall off. There are corporations like Target who I think have done an amazing job in following through on, helping like the BIPOC community, along with really taking a stand for the LGBTQ plus community. And they've had people come for them on both spectrums. And they're like, this is what we believe. And if you don't like it, don't shop at our store. And I love that. I think that is so powerful. Like, it gives me chills, because they are a corporation that is really standing firm in what they believe in. And I have seen a lot of big corporate companies change and shift their perspective, and I hope that it continues. I think that's all we can do is you know, use our voices. I personally, because I am just a party of one, I do donate. I am a part of PFLAG. I'm very active in the communities, and I just try to make sure that I stay educated and on top of things as much as I can.
I think it's very important. I think a lot of different organizations have different followers, different groups, different populations. So by them spreading that information, you know, it definitely, now you reach different groups. That said, I would say be genuine, you know, because folks can see through it. And I think that's one thing, you know, Natasha, you mentioned a lot of the Black Lives Matter stuff. I did feel at some point, I questioned a little bit of, right, is that really your deal? You know what I'm saying? Because I did look at some of these, I've shopped at some of these organizations in these places, and I know some of their ethics are a little bit different. So making sure that your messaging is genuine, you know, is very important. You know, but again, it's great to have that support. And I think you're reaching other populations, which is the awesome part. But really, you know, caution them to make sure that they're really about it in all different ways, because people are going to do their homework. I know for us, I'm really proud of our student leaders. We've challenged a lot of contracts and a lot of agreements that we've done for years. And our students just took a look at it. They looked at the contract, they looked at the business. Now that's the thing with the internet. You can pull up all your stuff and all your dirty laundry, see all that stuff. So they were able to look at some of these groups and go, why are we doing business with them? Let's cut this and let's change this and let's go with this. So we've kind of gotten into some things where it's actually ruffled a few feathers, but it's good. I mean, for us, we're standing up to them and we're saying, look, we're going to challenge that. We're not going to do business with these companies that are making other populations, you know, feel bad or they're doing harm to them. And we're going to challenge that norm. So I think that's the thing with nowadays. I think students and the society as a whole are going to do their research, and they're going to check on you, and they're going to see if you're not really about it, you know. And I think that's why it's important to really make sure you're sending a genuine message overall.
Yeah, Aaron, I think you said something I think that's really important, which is to be genuine. And I think, again, one of the consequences of social media becoming so woven through how we interact with each other and how, in this case, organizations interact with, you know, with the public, is that there's this assumption that to not say anything on an issue that would appear to be unequivocally a moral high ground is to be complicit in trying to oppose what is right, to be on the wrong side of the issue of history. But there isn't a one size fits all. And again, this is, you know, I come from the perspective of someone who works, you know, for an agency that conducts advocacy on behalf of a specific community, and certainly there are intersections, and you know that's obviously that's a deep and fertile conversation, I think, for those of us who are kind of thinking, you know, the way that we all are. But I also think we do have to yield to those who are best served to speak out on certain issues. And I'm not talking, again, as organizations, not as individuals. You know, but as somebody who has really devoted myself professionally and personally to fighting anti-Semitism, to educating against anti-Semitism, to widening the audience that I hope at least educates themselves about what anti-Semitism is and how it intersects with other forms of bias. I deeply believe in and will at any cost defend the right and responsibility of those who advocate on behalf of other causes to do that. But I also trust them to best serve their cause, and organizations to serve the causes that they were created to serve. So that dances around it a little bit, but I think that's the world we live in, day in and day out.
It's that gut check, like, should I say this, or how should I react to this? Like it's always like that, like think before you speak. Like I've had to really relearn that. Like think before I speak, think before I tweet, think before I post, you know, anything along those lines, because what you might feel passionate about might not be someone else's passion. And for me, what I feel, I grew up like in a melting pot of all different cultures and, you know, religions, and it's, for me, I don't see any difference, and I love everyone, and I feel like everyone lives in this world. So when I find out people don't, I'm like, what? This is so weird to me. But, you know, it's re-educating myself and doing that gut check too, like we're saying.
Yeah, it's a great point. And the fact that what you said about one's passion not necessarily being the passion of another, that's you know, so true. And yet it's a basic reality I think we forget. Right now, our organization is working with a large institution locally that's considering perhaps taking up the issue of anti-Semitism and adopting a position on anti-Semitism. And when we learned about that, obviously we reached out to assist in any way that we can, and we mobilized our community to work with the leadership of this other organization to help them learn about our perspective. But there are countless ways to take that stand. And I was very clear in my first conversation with the leadership of this organization. Look, even though this is priority number one for Jewish Long Beach, it's not priority number 1, 2, 10, or 20 for your organization, and that's something I respect. And so, you know, we will have this conversation, you know, on your terms and at your pace, and we want to be helpful in educating you so you can decide whether to take that position, whether to actually enter that fray, or perhaps whether to address it a different way.
And I think you all bring up a really important point, and I'd love to hear your perspectives on, you know, Erin, you say you talk to the student organizations and leaders, and Zachary, when you're talking to people, you know, kind of where priorities stand and things like that. But how important do you think that diversity and inclusion is in combating incivility, whether in the workplace or from, you know, the general population? Like, how do you think that ties in to that issue? Or do you think it does? Because I think it does. And from what you're saying, I would love to expand on it a little. Whether that's the people you work with or your audience.
Well, I think one of the most effective ways to generate an understanding about somebody who's different from you is to expose yourself and be with people who are different. And I think again, another example just from the Jewish communal world, our campus houses the JCC of the Upper JCC of Long Beach in West Orange County. And, you know, I really think of their work as first and foremost a bridge building enterprise and a demystification of the Jewish community and who we are to the broader community. You know, 70-ish% of the people who walk through the door to use the facilities on the campus are not Jewish, but they're walking into a facility that's run from a Jewish value system that is awash in Jewish people and symbolism, and that makes it a lot harder then for somebody who is exposed to our community through those people and places and symbols to then go out into the broader community and disparage Jews or the Jewish community. And it really, I think that goes both ways. When we walk into a space or enter into a relationship with someone who, you know, is of a different identity, and we all have kind of multiple personal identities, but it creates a collegiality and a respect that is more powerful, I think, than any kind of apprehension or bias that is served by not operating in a diverse environment.
So, you know, it's interesting because actually this morning we took part in a anti-racism. There's a course that all staff are now, we have to take some courses now on anti-racism and learning about various cultures. And I've been in this job for 18 years, and I'll be truthful, I don't think we've seen anything like that in the last. I think a lot of the stuff that happened these past four years and moving forward, I think is now, you know, kind of making us think differently and looking at what information we know. And, you know, so I think it's amazing that it's happening. I feel bad that it's happening at this point, but I'm happy that it's happening, because when I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, okay, I know this information, but I'm happy to see that there's so many other people here that may or may not. So now that allows you to better serve your population a lot better, and it just creates, you know, more harmonious environment. I think students should also have this opportunity. So when I was in school, I hate to say it, we didn't really have that. You did have really good ethnic studies classes that you were able to take that were phenomenal. And I like the discussion of having that more in your general education. I think that should be more upfront than an elective, because I don't know if many people would take that, but I do think that it's an important thing to set the table and understand who you're in school with, who are you around, you know what I'm saying? Because I think it's just a better way to approach that. I think, you know, for me, it's just getting that information so late. I was like, what's going on? Why am I getting this and I'm 43 years old? You know, I should have heard this earlier on. I think it would have been a lot more beneficial. So I would hope that discussion happens earlier on in a lot of your lives. And honestly, this whole thing is making us look beyond that. Let's go K through 12. Let's look at what we're teaching our kids. I would love to know what a history class looks like for a kid K through 12. I know when I was in school, I was upset, and I fought that class because I didn't like the way that African Americans were represented in history. And I challenged my teachers. And I told them about that, and it kind of created some friction, but it was good. It was good dialogue just to let them know, you know, we weren't just slaves. We were this and that, and we did this. We were inventors, and we had all these other contributions to the world. So I think we need to, this whole environment needs to look at that model of, you know, bringing in more information early on. You're coming in and you're in your first year, you should be hearing some stuff about what environment you're coming into. We have students that are coming here from all across the world, and you don't actually know what messaging is being presented about the various cultures. As a Black man on campus, I see a lot of that. So I see people who react to me differently that are from other cultures. They look at me, they think I'm gonna steal their purse or their wallet. I'm like, dude, I work here. What are you doing? I've been working here for like 20 years. Like, what am I gonna do? Where am I gonna run? You know, so it's like, I look at that, but I think, oh, that came from something. So that came from some messaging that you saw that made you fear me walking down this hallway, even though I'm wearing a tie and I look like I'm leaving my office, you know, but that's the information and the education that needs to happen early on, really fast. To be quite honest, we need to be thinking about that, you know, sooner. And I don't know where that discussion is or where it landed, but I do think that we need to bring in more, you know, broad education about cultures, who's here, who's on this campus, and who are you next to when you're sitting in these classes. I think that'll help things moving forward. But like I said, that's just college, and we need to expand that out and go even earlier, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I grew up going to Catholic school, and going back when I was like, my memories, I'm like, we didn't learn about this, we didn't learn. And then it wasn't until I was in college and I took, you know, cultural anthropology, world religions, all of the different type of humanities classes, and I'm a comm major, but it just interests me. And it's sad that like I had to learn that from it being interested in it. Like it wasn't mandatory. Like, oh, I need this class for an elective. Like like you're correct. Some of these classes should be required as part of your graduation. Something I would share with all of you, I've been the last 18 years, 18 years, I worked in fast-paced environments. Like I worked in cosmetics, I worked in tech, I worked in agency life. And to, you know, Aaron and Zach's point, you have these micro learnings, but the only thing we were ever given training on as managers in corporate America was sexual harassment. Yeah. We were never given training on civility or, you know, any, you know, how to properly coach someone and teach them, you know, you know, what not to say, what to say. So I would say, as the next leadership group that's going out into corporate America, when you are at your job, make sure you're pushing on these leadership. Like, if there's not a lot of corporate companies now have like clubs, and they have like, oh, the culture committee. And it's like where you think you just do a bunch of fun things, but you also do charitable outreach. Well, make sure you're doing charitable outreach, not just for one cause, but all different causes. And that was something that I took as a big learning. And it's like, why are we only learning about sexual harassment? There's so many other things that are wrong in corporate America, the pay gap. There's so many things we can go on and on all night about. But, you know, if you're going to go out there and you're going to be a leader, and it speaks very highly of you that you're here tonight listening to all of us, just keep that with you as you make your journey forward after school.
Love it.
That's an amazing point. And it shows how deep this runs, you know, the kind of ideas around, you know, we say civility because that's our buzzword, but really it's about how we learn from each other, respect each other, see each other. And the fact that you said it's taken this long for us to kind of see a lot of the progression is a sad way. I have a lot of faith and hope my generation, I think maybe a little bit of a generation above our audience even, but like the younger people, even younger than me, who are on it and are open and want to learn about other people and respect other people. I have a lot of hope and faith in that. And I agree that it starts with education, and it's something that we should have been teaching a long time ago for a lot of people. One thing I also find interesting, Natasha, when you say, you know, all we talked about we talked about how do you address your audience? How do you deal with like incivility or civility with those? But like inside of your own businesses or organizations or corporations, yeah, like what do you think the future of, you know, civil responsibility or social responsibility looks like? Is it just classes? Is it just, you know, what is the bigger picture of how, you know, professionals and organizations can work, you know, in a better direction that's beyond just sexual harassment training?
Right?
Which is the bare minimum, and they probably still need a lot more of that too.
Yeah, and there's companies that don't even do that, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? There's just so much. I mean, for me, you know, as I grow and get a team, you know, it's the constant education. But I feel like for right now, you know, I'm involved in PFLAG, and I sit in on webinars that they hold, and I'm involved with PRSA. So I'm involved with PRSA National and the Orange County chapter. I'm also involved in the sports and entertainment section because my clients fall in there. And I really enjoy taking webinars and just reading and making sure that I sit in on as much free information as I can. I'm a forever student, so I feel like that's never going to stop. And I implore all of you to continue to be students. Like, don't let it stop after school, because knowledge is really power. For me, I can't do much as far as like get out in the community right now because of COVID, but you know, I have made a budget in my business line items to donate every single month. So whether it's donating to Planned Parenthood, to Black Lives Matter organization, to, you know, the Asian American Heritage Fund, whatever it is, it's making sure that I'm going out there and I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And it's not something I always broadcast, because for me, it's just, again, if I'm going to talk about it, I need to be about it. So just educating myself and making sure that I'm on top of it as much as possible.
I think like continually assessing too, you know, where we are. So when we do things, you know, for example, we have these courses that we're doing. I think continue to assess our various populations. I'm not sure how many of you that are on campus filled out the campus climate survey, but that's a great opportunity to really share your opinion on how you feel on campus. It does go to, I think, all the students, and I know staff. I had an opportunity to participate in it this year, and it was great. It was great to just say what was on my mind. I hope they use that information and that data to now inform and make better decisions moving forward. I think our experiences complement each other. So I'm an auxiliary on campus, so not necessarily academic, but we support the academic process. So I think it's both our jobs to kind of collectively look out for students and making sure that we're elevating them and and bringing them into, you know, if they're not seeing certain things, and just giving them that perspective in one realm, which is my job, and hopefully preparing them to be better professionals. But they also need to get that from the academic side too. So that's why I'm going to challenge all you students that are in the audience, speak up. You know, if you go to your Senate meeting, it's every Wednesday, you know, 3:30. So you have a general opinion period where you could talk to all your student leaders and tell them what you think about things and what you want to see. There's also academic senate. There's also all these different boards and groups that meet that talk about curriculum and all these things on campus, that you have a say so. Ultimately, you are the customer. You are paying for this educational experience. You should be challenging that and not just taking what you get. You know what I'm saying? You could shape your experience and make sure if you hear something. I used to sit in class and kid you not, I had a teacher that told us in class, this is college, she said that all music originated in Europe. And I said, what? And no one said anything in the class, right? I was the only person that was like, wait a minute, hold on. You know what I'm saying? And I said something and she was kind of thrown off, but I was like, no one else would have said anything. This is literally the, you know, the wife of the chair. So she teaches the intro. This is the intro to music class. So you probably, and I'm in a lecture hall with about 200 people. So you multiply that times 5 or however many classes she has. So again, don't just take what you're getting. You know what I'm saying? Know that you have a role in this thing too, and it's twofold. So speak up. If you don't feel like you're getting something or you're hearing something that's not right, or you want to have a better experience or a more balanced experience, you know, then let people know. You know, let us know. Let your administrators know. Let your student leaders know. Let the folks that are in those positions know, so they can now take that up the chain. They can just say, hey, you know, right now we're doing a survey for the plus-minus grading policy. That thing has 9,000 students that have responded to that, you know, so it's awesome that students are speaking up, but we want more of that. And I want to challenge you all to do that more and more. That's the only way things are going to get better, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the only thing I can think of to add is we really have to develop muscle memory for that defaults to civil discourse. And that's not going to happen overnight. I think that we have seen, again, a breakdown in our willingness to understand people of different perspectives, different backgrounds, who look at things from a different angle. You know, when the sun is rising or setting, if you're looking at the same tree from the east, you're going to see a completely different tree than you do if you're looking at it from the west. And that's the function of where you're standing, not who you are at your core. So social media look, it's a tool. We are stuck with it. We all use it, hopefully to great effect. Hopefully we use it for good. But if I have a charge to all of you, it's get out of your comfort zone, both in that virtual, you know, marketplace of ideas, but even more importantly, when you're unplugged. And I know we're hopefully emerging from this pandemic. Get out of your comfort zone. Go to meetings of groups and organizations that are not in your realm of understanding, that are different from you, that might represent ideologies that are different from yours. Is the only way that you're going to learn tolerance. And I don't love that word because we want to celebrate each other, not merely to tolerate each other, but we do also need to coexist with those who might think differently from us or even have ideas that are abhorrent to us. So get out of your comfort zone, embrace all that is outside of that comfort zone, engage people. Also, don't fall into the trap of making the assumption that just because somebody doesn't share your passion for whatever it is you're passionate about, that it isn't worth fighting for. Because if everybody as individuals fights for the things that they feel are non-negotiable, then we're going to live in a better world. And as organizations, we're going to be able to better serve our communities.
I think that's bravo to all of the answers, because, and I think that shows too, we all need to be agents of change, right? Personally responsible for what we do and say and how we interact with others, and then professionally be cognizant of how we react with not just our coworkers, but our audiences, and as organizations, you know, the responsibility that we have to promote civility and understanding and respect. I know for me, through all of our campaign and learning, it's broken down very simply of just respecting, understanding, and learning about people who, you know, maybe don't look like you, sound like you, or come from the same place as you. And if we can do that, we often have very similar points of view. We just don't know it because we don't allow it to get there. So yeah, these conversations are great because they take lefts and rights and turns and they go every which way because it's such an important topic. So I appreciate all of those insights. And those are my questions. So I want to just see if our audience has anything that they want to ask. And I know that we are, yeah, please. And you, Shani, you can totally unmute. I can ask to unmute you if you want to ask your question instead of typing it. If you want to type it in the chat, please feel free. But come on in here.
Hi. So I just wanted to say, oh, I'm pinned.
Join us.
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys with the point that we definitely need more diversity. One thing I did notice though, is that you guys are in a position of power, right? So you guys do the picking. You guys get to choose who works for you. You're the boss, which is awesome. I think I have more of a scenario type question in terms of civility. So let's say you have the best employee ever, right? The best employee ever does everything that they're supposed to do. You can't afford to lose them. And then you find out that they are anti-Semitic, or you find out, you know, that they are homophobic or they are racist. How do you maintain that workplace civility? What do you do as the boss?
Tough question.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, it's actually come up in my corporate experience. It's been a hard one. You know, I was fortunate that I had a human resource department that backed me, that we have a code. You know, it's really important that when you work for a company, they have a code of ethics and just a basic code of ethics. And, you know, we found out that this individual was making very, very nasty, you know, slurs, etc. And so what we did is we brought them in and, you know, we let them know that, you know, this is against the company's code of ethics. This isn't who we stand for. And, you know, unfortunately we have to part ways. So it's because it's not just a poor reflection on you as a leader by allowing it to continuously happen. It's bad for the company as well, because if you have a code of ethics and you're out there, and this is a very large international tech company, and you know, they just were like, we don't stand by this, we can't have it. And it was even comments made off company time, and you know, they were like, you know what, if someone were to see this that was one of our clients or one of our investors, that's it. So, you know, it was great. I was proud of the company for doing the right thing, but it also was a lesson for that person. Like you can't get away with being that person. And I think like even more so anymore, it's not going to be easy to be that person anymore. So you either need to educate yourself and change, or it's going to be a tough road for you.
Not being afraid to pull them aside and call them on it. I think you can't allow that behavior to happen. So for me, I actually had an experience with a student. He was brilliant, but he would make some really bad, like, racial generalizations, you know, and a lot of times they were even towards African Americans. So I'd say, okay. So I pulled him in the office and we talked about this, you know, and I just said, you know, that's offensive, and you need to be really mindful of how you come off to people. You know, you're going to go super far, no doubt, you know, in this world, but you need to know that that's a major thing that you need to address. So for us, again, we also have our, you know, there's a set of things that we have to do. So the first thing is a verbal warning. You get 2 verbal warnings, you get a write-up, you get another write-up, and you get let go. So not being afraid to do that. And I think that's okay. I mean, it's a verbal warning. And I think after that verbal warning, you know, the student straightened up. But I think not being afraid to call that out. If you hear something, I think a lot of times you might hear something and you might, did I just hear that? You know, and I know for me, I heard it and I said, okay, no, you got to come in the office. So the first thing I heard, I pulled him in, and that was it, you know. So you have to take that measure and just really be, you know, and not be passive about that, and not think it's going to go away or maybe this will get better and this and that, because it can get worse for that person. And again, this is 10 years ago. So now if that were to happen now, it would have probably been way more explosive. So, you know, it means to do it even more so now. There's even more urgency on it now. So I'd really make sure that you're talking to that person immediately and letting them know, you know, that this can get them in some trouble down the line.
Aaron, there was a quote someone said on, it was on the news one night, and it stuck with me, and it's been months. And it was, "Gone are the days of letting things slide."
Right.
And I was like, wow. I was like, you know what? You're right. Like, that's our responsibility right now, is like, it doesn't just slide anymore. Like, I heard that, but I'm going to pretend I didn't hear it. How many times have we all said that? Now it's like, oh no, I heard you. And now we're going to talk about it because it's not right. So, you know, that's something, to your point, like what you just said, like calling them on it, like, and that quote just has resonated with me ever since.
And all the other students in that room saw me pull them aside. And that was the other thing that was important, because now folks know we're not going to tolerate this. So they didn't have to hear the conversation. They just know they got pulled behind closed doors and something serious happened. So I think that's also the bigger message too, is making sure that it doesn't spread.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think we also have to ask the question of, first of all, what was the forum? What did they do? What was said? But are they willing to accept education? Are they willing to, do they have a willingness and a desire to, is it ignorance, or is it truly anti-Semitism, racism? Is it unconscious bias, or is it intentional bias? And I think that's a question to ask. And if it's the latter and it's being overtly expressed, then I think there's not a place for it. You know, now how to deal with it from an HR standpoint, and you know, especially if it's in a corporate setting, unfortunately, extracting yourself from a situation like that as an organization and cutting ties with someone is not as easy as it should be in that type of a scenario. But you make it happen. But, you know, if it is unconscious bias, then I think there may be a responsibility to try and bring that person to light a little bit. And I think you can actually catalyze change one person at a time. And that's somebody who, if they're willing to understand that they are expressing perspectives or viewpoints that are dangerous, that are biased, and they're willing to really soul search. And look, I can tell you, I'm somebody who's been there, who has, I think, expressed unconscious bias and kind of self-policed and sought counsel from others, and you know, hopefully has been better for it. And I think more people than we realize have kind of been there. And so I think that's important too. But you know, no doubt, I think Natasha, your you know, the notion that we live in times where the time for leniency on these types of things has passed is true. And so I think that's the question. Is the bias conscious or unconscious? If it's unconscious, is the person willing to really soul search? And if not, then they're just not right for any setting that I'd be a part of.
Thank you guys for that. I did have another question because you just brought up that quote. I'm quick to cancel, right? Mm-hmm. Throughout our campaign, though, it has been brought up that a lot of people feel like cancel culture leads to incivility. But I kind of align more with what the quote you said. Gone are the days that you can get away with stuff. You can't get away with things anymore. And I hold people accountable to the things that they've done. Like, yes, I believe in growth. I believe people can change, but that doesn't mean that you get away with what you said. So how do you guys think about cancel culture? Because maybe you think differently than I, and I would just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of mixed on that. I go off of this situation, and I don't want to say some situations are better than others because that's so subjective, right? But you know, there has been times where I knew someone personally that was a part of a cancel culture movement against her, and it was an honest mistake. It was, you know, she posted something that had no malice behind it. It was a game that had become very whitewashed. That was a game. It's the Mahjong game. I don't know if you guys saw it on BuzzFeed. It was a thing. So actually, she's a publicist and she does not represent the company. She had done like a gift guide, and she grew up playing Mahjong. So she had it in her, you know, 10 slide, whatever, on Instagram. Somehow when they got out in the news and everywhere, they Googled it and she came up, but it was her PR agency, and she had no ties, never met them and nothing. She grew up playing Mahjong. She woke up the next day to death threats, to just the craziest thing you can imagine. And it was people quick to assume she was a publicist. She represented these women that had, you know, made the game and didn't know what they were doing. And she was on a PR mastermind I'm on, and she's crying. And I said, well, here's what you need to do. You need to make a statement. You need to do this. You need to do that. And then you need to educate yourself. Like, why you might have thought it was cute, but why did they culturally inappropriate it? Like, why are people upset? And then like figure that out. So that's like an instance where it was like, whoa. And not just because I knew her, it was more like, I can see how people wouldn't understand how making it, you know, they use the term whitewashed, you know, of the game. You know, I can see that. There are times though where somebody says something and you better believe that's canceled like 100% by me. Like, especially coming from, you know, Latin descent, to have a prominent Latin company come out and make such horrible claims, and that's a staple in our food and our community. I was like, oh yeah, we ain't ever buying Goya again. And no one in my family is allowed to buy Goya again. So that's just like one example. That was an immediate cancel for us.
I had to let Sazone go. It
hurt. Girl, you can email me. I got a better replacement for you. But you know, it's one of those, and it doesn't have MSG. So it's one of those things where, you know, I have to be mindful, and it goes back to what I said earlier about like doing my research and making sure, okay, am I educated before I make a statement, or I personally just choose to not, you know, support this organization any longer. You know, there are times where I think we're quick to just cancel before doing the due diligence and research on like, why did they say it? What did they really say? What did they mean? What is the issue that they're talking about, and making sure that we're making educated response. So I think that's like a new buzzword though, this cancel culture thing. I think it's like, it's been going along, it's been around for so long, but it's just one of those things now where everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, I do think we have to be a little careful with it though. I fear we're getting into the territory where we're trying to anticipate via people's thoughts and actions and read tea leaves. And I get concerned about getting to the point where we're legislating thought. And that's one concern. And Natasha, I think you said it eloquently, you know, really just having to make sure doing your due diligence before, someone or something or some agency is the spotlight is shown on them for being engaging in dangerous and biased behavior. The other thing, we have to make sure that we're holding everyone to the same standard. You know, are we opposing one type of bias, whether it's through cancellation or some other, consequences, with the same fervor that we are another type of bias? And the answer, I wish, could always be yes. I know it can't be, but we do have to be careful to make sure that we are coming as close as possible to holding each other all to the same standard, regardless of who the bias is coming from and where it's directed.
Yeah, I agree with both responses. I think, it's good to hold folks accountable, right now for what's going on. And really challenging thing. I think that's on a lot of levels too. I mean, look at your analytics. What sites do you click on? What do you have to look at all of that stuff? Because a lot of that stuff feeds into that as well. That's why you're getting certain things, is because you're clicking on certain things. So I really make it a point I always do an analytic shift when I'm looking at stuff. So if I'm looking at certain articles, I'm like, let me throw something else in the mix just in case they're looking at my thing, and let me try something else just to change up my profile. But I'm about calling out things and not being silent about that, because I do think we've let certain things pass for way too long. To a lot of different populations. That said, similar to what Natasha said, people need to read. I'll be honest with you, the captions, people do not read captions on our social media posts so many times, and they jump off and they flip out. And I'm like, did you read the information in that thing? We said this, So you're so quick to jump on the bandwagon, and you're so quick to jump on what everyone's saying, and you get all hot, and you're like, damn, we kind of gave you the facts and the answer right there. So it's making sure that, I think cancel culture does need to be informed sometimes on issues and get a little bit more context and a little bit more understanding. I think also really checking your sources, because I think there's so many things that you'll see out there that can support you in the wrong direction, and you're running off in this wrong information direction when really you probably should have done a really more thorough search than one or two sources. So making sure that you're informed in your decision, is key. And I don't see a lot of that. I see a lot of, when I look at a lot of the comments, a lot of the things, I'm like, where are these people from? What is going on? Where are the world is living in? But that's the reality. People are there. It's the Jerry Springer culture. I may be dating myself with that, but but it's that culture of folks that they want, they're just feeding the fire and it's drama, and they don't want to hear anything else. But I think making sure that you're informed is really, really, really important to go alongside. It needs to accompany this movement.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank
Great
you for your
questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we talk a lot about cancel culture and what does it mean, and what's that versus accountability, and how do you keep people accountable, but like you said, also do your due diligence, especially when we tend to live in echo chambers, whether we make them ourselves or they're given to us by, a Facebook algorithm. It happens that way often. So being accountable for that is definitely important. I want to wrap us up, but we can make this a quick one. I know Alyssa put a question in the chat, and it can just be a super simple one, and then we'll call it after that. But they want to know if you support businesses that don't speak out on certain issues. And I think we found out that when they do, like, oh yeah, maybe you don't, but just a little quick answer for her, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. I mean, a quick just blurb for me is silence is complacency. So I thought that was the biggest eye opener during Black Lives Matter. And when people were silent, they were complacent. And to me, that was an eye opener. And I was like, all right, I got you. Like I made my list and it really was disheartening to see people speak out too late. And if they did, and sometimes it wasn't, even if they spoke out on time, it wasn't really appropriate. So being a communications professional, yeah, I'm on top of it, but I'm also on top of it as a person that this is like, it means a lot to me. So just to quickly say, I do pay attention to that, but I don't fact check every single business I go to, but if it's a larger business and corporation, I definitely, try to do my due diligence on them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because, again, there's like all of these other questions, the answer to this is really nuanced, I think, and it's complex. I'll give the example though of back in 2018, the Tree of Life synagogue shooting that unfortunately it occurred, but the result was that it started a conversation on anti-Semitism in this country that I think was overdue, long overdue. And I noticed that a number of businesses with large national profiles were speaking out, and others weren't. And I didn't choose not to patronize those that didn't. And it comes down to just kind of a smell test and a gut feel. Do I need to punish Shell Oil because it didn't make a statement on anti-Semitism, and so I'm not going to get my gas at the corner Shell station anymore? The answer is no. But there are other types of organizations that maybe have more of a responsibility to take a stand on something like that. And but again, one size doesn't fit all is the basic answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm careful in who I support. I do look at sometimes what messaging they put out without saying it so overtly. I mean, there are companies like H&M that just step in it, and that's a definitely easy thing to cut right there. When I saw that, I was like, well, that's it for H&M, but other times it's just looking at maybe if they're looking at their feed and some of their marketing and what imagery are you putting out here? What culture are you speaking to? Who are you showing in your ads? That kind of stuff kind of informs you on a business sometimes too. And that's what I look at as well, is what do someone's ads look like? What are they doing? Who are you catering this stuff to? And what are you saying about this particular culture? As an African American, we get a lot of different portrayals and a lot of things. And I look at a lot of that, and that does determine my support, for these organizations or not. But again, it's sometimes I don't like actively dig. If we'll find stuff here and there. I'm not going out and go, wait, I'm going to Walmart. No, I can't go to Walmart. This and that. I mean, actually, Walmart is one of my no-go lists. So I don't mess around with them. But, again, I live down the street from a Target. I know Target gets in bed with some interesting topics, but, I look at stuff, like I said, if I see things that are definitely offensive, I definitely don't get involved with those organizations. And again, in terms of speaking up on certain things, I just look at their general stances throughout other things. So what have you said previously? And that's looking at their thread and seeing where were you? Did you say other things about other issues, but maybe not this issue? And that tells me who you are right there. So then I would maybe not support that business or maybe support them if they are about it.
There's a great documentary on Netflix called 13th about the 13th Amendment.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, my boyfriend and I watched that, and we got out a piece of paper and a pen, and we started writing all of the companies down, and I researched them. And I was like, okay, we know not to give money here. I mean, it was this entire month long of like research and doing due diligence. And for me, that I was like, this has been out for a year. And how sad, again, it took something like George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement for that to even get the publicity it deserved. And it was done beautifully. So if you haven't seen it, absolutely watch it. I think it's done amazing.
It was a good one.
Yeah.
And I watched it a while when it came out. Yeah. But I mean, this is also a great point toward, all of us going into the profession of these things matter now, and your messages matter, whether you're an individual, an organization, a corporation. What you say and what you do and what you support matters. And I think that's what's going to help us progress in society, right? Because we can lift everyone up regardless of who you are, where you come from. And once we can do that, then we hopefully won't have these issues anymore. I think that's the goal.
I have faith in all of you. Your generation is so woke. I love it. The last panel I did for Cal State Long Beach, you guys were I got off of that panel and I was just like so energized, and I was like, I have so much faith in our next generation. I was just so happy. So, I thank all of you for really being active voices and being here tonight, because it's fulfilling for someone on the outside that's been out of school for quite a while to see. So.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. And we, as future communications practitioners, I know I take it to heart, and I think especially after working on this campaign, even more so. And I am as excited to work, with my student colleagues as you are to see them, because I agree with you, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for all of us. I think it's only going to get better. So I really appreciate you joining us tonight. This was really, really wonderful, and I know that our guests did too. For those who are still with us here, we of course encourage everyone to sign our pledge. We do have a Civility Pledge for organizations as well. So we would love if you guys would pledge your organizations to Civility too. The website is there. We have quite a few PR and other organizations. So if you want, it's there for you to take a look. And like I said, we're all agents of change. So we've all signed that already as well. And for I'm like, it's all the stuff we've talked about today. It's very on. So yeah, we figure the more you see it, the more we talk about it. Like we said, these conversations, just knowing that it's at the forefront of your mind is how we can all be agents of change toward, more civil society and especially in public discourse as well. And for anyone who wants to join us this Saturday, of course, we have our caravan. We'll be starting in the Belmont parking lot. It's all on our website in the event section as well. If you want to have a caravan for civility, socially distant, bring your mask. That's all we ask. And we'll have the pens. We'll decorate your cars for you. We'll have a good time. So we'll wrap it up. If you guys could stay for just a second, though, our panelists, we'd love to take a picture with you before you go. Sure. But for everybody else, thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you this weekend. And of course, check out our website for this recording, other recordings. We have tons of really fantastic resources there for you, books, videos, podcasts, everything, anything you want to know about this topic, it's there. We encourage you to take a look. So thank you guys so much for joining again. We are happy to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for the honor.
Of course, of course.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.